The next call is a split call between National and the Maori Party. Dr. Pamji Palmer, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand and take this call to support the Employment Standards Legislation Bill on its second reading. Mr. Speaker, as a member on the Transport and Industrial Relations Select Committee, I want to acknowledge and thank all submitters for their contributions, which I highly value. I also want to acknowledge the Select Committee Chair, Jonathan Young, and also the Minister, Honourable Michael Woodhouse, for the work that he has done on this bill. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a very timely bill, as it addresses various issues arising due to diversification of employee and employer relationships, changing work environments, and changing family needs. And as we have already heard, Mr. Speaker, this bill attracted a huge number of submissions. In those submissions, there was actually a big chunk which were form submissions. And if I just exclude form submissions, still, Mr. Speaker, unique submissions were quite high, 1,920, close to that, Mr. Speaker. We received unique submissions on this bill. So this bill has been closely examined, and as a result, the Select Committee has made some very practical recommendations. And Mr. Speaker, this bill is necessary because there are things which cannot be left to good faith relationship between employees and employers. But both groups, employees and employers, they want growth. They want to see legislation that supports growth. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill is about supporting growth while promoting flexibility and fairness at workplaces, again for both groups, employers and employees, Mr. Speaker. From my own experience, Mr. Speaker, being an employee and employer in the past, I understand the importance of retaining flexibility and also understand the importance of having the ability to have mutual agreements, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I want to acknowledge, I understand there are some unfair elements in so-called zero-hour contracts, and that is why we need this bill. This bill is to address those unfair components in so-called zero-hours contracts, Mr. Speaker. But this bill is not just about zero-hour contracts. This bill is also about making paid parental leave more flexible and practical, and is also about supporting the enforcement of minimum entitlements. Mr. Speaker, I believe in fairer workplaces and flexible labour market that supports productivity and is also about providing enhanced protection to employers and employees. It's not about focusing on just one group, employers or employees. We need both groups, Mr. Speaker. Employers need employees to run their businesses, and employees need employers because they create employment. And so, Mr. Speaker, it's about retaining flexibility, but also providing certainty to both groups, employers and employees. And this bill is also about supporting the enforcement of minimum entitlements, for which employers will be required to keep record of various things related to employment so that they can demonstrate compliance to minimum entitlement provisions. And also, Mr. Speaker, the recording of various things related to employment like wages, leave, holidays, etc. will be made consistent in various employment legislation so that it's easy to establish compliance. And this part of the bill is, Mr. Speaker, mainly for businesses which are not compliant. And we want to see that those businesses comply. And if they don't comply, there will be financial penalties, and the seriousness of the breach will be reflected in those penalties. And Mr. Speaker, I can fully understand that feeling of power imbalance between employers and employees, which has come through quite a lot. And that is why this bill is also about two-way communication, having two-way communication between employers and employees. So things which are agreed will be in the agreement, Mr. Speaker, like number of hours. If they are agreed, they should be in the agreement, and also availability provision should be in the agreement, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I quickly want to also touch on paid parental leave, because this bill is also about paid parental leave. It's making it more flexible and practical, and is also about extending parental leave entitlement to a wider group other than biological parents and formal adoptive parents. And the other great thing about this bill is, Mr. Speaker, keeping in touch for employees on paid parental leave. So overall, Mr. Speaker, it's a great bill. I support this bill and commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.